LC co-founder, and of course, one of the member of our integral family, right? We already seen and talked about integral approaches, and Marilyn and Marina Demchenko and Christian shared with us some approaches based on integral developments, right? And Darrell, welcome. How are you?
Oh, all right. How are
So
you,
Darrell is
everybody?
going
I have a
to
sense.
share
I
with
caught
us
the
social
last part
experience
of,
lab.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
cool. I caught the
Please
last
go
part
ahead.
of the last presentation. It sounded wonderful. A lot of things I always think about. Slowing down to speed up. Those are precepts I
Uh-huh.
completely resonate with.
Thank you.
So, now are you driving? Am I putting up slides, or how's it work?
You can share it in your own convenience, please. Feel free
Okay, let's see. Okay.
to push the share button. And
All right, let's see.
so Daryl is going to share with us social experience lab, spiral dynamics integral, and it has two parts. I'm so excited.
Well, it's only 30 minutes, so it's not a whole lot, I could share, but I will do my best to proceed as
You have a second part, right? So you have time with us.
I do. Yeah. All right. So a little bit about me. Basically, it's hard to talk about yourself, but if I had to synopsize it, I see myself as a futurist. All those words: visionary, strategist, provocateur, transformation. I like to think of myself as a futurist. I met Don Beck for the first time at the World's Future Society. And after that, for the next 22, 23 years, we're compadres, as he would say. I like to look at things which I borrowed from the Odysseus methodology. A lot of what I do is a combination of using the Odysseus methodology along with the spiral dynamics integral. And so in that work, what I have decided was the things that are worthwhile going after are what I call, and I didn't coin the phrase, I picked it up from a couple of different places, but wicked problems and social messes was the thing I thought useful to go into. When you have tools like spiral dynamics integral, which can scale up to, a societal level solution set, as well as what Dr. Beck considered Dr. Odysseus methodology to be, which he always thought and related to me was second tier. So between these two things is what I kind of work with. And I add to that mix a couple of other disciplines. For instance, I will add to that mix of things in my work, appreciative inquiry and cognitive psychology and things of this nature. So, and I like to think of what I do in that addressing wicked problems and social messes as seeing things for what they are. And the phrase VUCA was actually coined by a Army general who was explaining what the world condition would be, and as he related it, he likened it to, he coined this phrase: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I heard that also a little bit in the last presentation. So we're pretty much all on the same wavelength. And in general, I would say my approach to life is to go to wherever I'm at, wherever I'm being, whatever it is I'm doing in that moment. I'm to be in an attitude of gratitude with a view towards constant remembrance, which is a term I borrow and gravitate towards from the meditation discipline of heartfulness, which is another part of my life. So that's about me. And a whole lot about me is some of the things I like to do, which are those things. So the core idea about what I'm going to relate, if I have the opportunity to get through it all, is that this VUCA describes institutional forces which really permeate the atmosphere, as I would say, in which everybody has to operate: individuals, organizations, communities, and we're, in that sense, have to navigate and struggle to, get clarity out of things. So VUCA makes it even more difficult if you take that as a basis when you have a very complex organization. So I've worked in government my entire career for the most part. And even after I retired from working as an internal consultant for strategy inside the government, I took on clients afterwards, which also dealt with governments. And so the fundamental question is, how can a person working in one of these complex organizations be transformed using and acknowledging their values to help recreate the environment for which they operate? And, when I say that, I mean in terms of the ideas, the concepts, and insights that are used. Give me 1 second. I need to turn my heater off. Sorry. Anyway, so the goals in this part one, I'm going to talk a little bit about a game that was developed by Dr. Beck in working with the Odysseus Institute. So I have instantiated and developed the game a little bit further. It's a board game that is a good way to kick off any kind of strategic initiative, cultural initiative, reorganization initiative. If you're going to do an offsite, be it of a strategic nature oriented towards change management, whatever the project is, you can do change in many different ways. You can change in the manner that Lean Six Sigma requires, which is incremental, little by little, little by little. You keep gaining and building on the change from the previous effort. And I've done that many years. And that is definitely a way of getting from point A to point B, particularly when you're dealing with organizations. And my focus tends to be on organization. However, I am appreciative of the fact, organizations are people. And so, which is why, I have over the years collaborated with various professional coaching organizations in my work. Although I have been certified, for instance, with years ago when I worked with Eric, I got certified by Coach Training Institute. I haven't kept that up, but I got the training and involved the coaching methodology in the work I do, because I tend to work with executives in small groups, but inherently in that there's a need to get with an executive, a professional, and try to, help them come to clarity and appreciate where they are and understand who they are and all that kind of stuff. All the good reasons to do coaching I use as a bolt-on. But for the most part, my focus, if I had to put it philosophically, would be, I think, where I try to make a difference in being on the planet is to acknowledge that we can't get to where we want to be in terms of abundance, humaning well, and all the goodness that comes along with that, unless one of the main institutions that exist in the world today are corporations. And if corporations aren't finding their soul, and you could extrapolate from that and say organizations, not just corporations, particularly government, of which I know a lot about from having worked inside the bureaucracy. I use a phrase I borrowed also from Dr. Odysseus, which is, we're sheeps, in corporations and large organizations run around in wolves' clothing, so you have to act tough, be tough and all that. But when really deep down inside, you're a human being. And I would tell executives, I would tell them, about the need and the fact that no matter how professional they are, no matter if their discipline is engineering, no matter if their discipline is software development, whatever that is, the technicalities of executing that is one thing, but it doesn't remove the fact that they're human beings. And so I think it's very useful when we talk about goals that the organizational climate, managerial norms, as well as the individual attitudes, all are thrown in the mix as you attempt to understand this VUCA environment we operate in today. Now, I'm not sure, Alexia, how you do questions, but I can take a question anywhere along the line, because I'm of the mind, I've learned over the years, you put presentations together. I was given once an hour to do a presentation, and then the Admiral aide came over to me and said, well, you got 30 minutes. And I said, okay, all right. So then another 5-6 minutes went by. He came back and said, well, you got 10 minutes now. So, I've learned you can start off with a 30-minute presentation, but if the people listening have some thoughts that were sparked by anything I said, I think it's appropriate to go down that rabbit hole, and I can always return. Okay, so if there's a question anywhere along the way, please ask, and we can have a conversation about that question.
Yeah, I would suggest our colleagues, right, to type their questions in the chat box. We will see it, and I can announce it for you. Okay.
Okay.
Because I know that you have more slides even in this part, right, and some frameworks and tools to describe. So maybe we can go through that, right, and after that, check the questions again.
All right.
Sounds good.
So basically, this first presentation introduces to everyone the game. And Marilyn may have seen this. I'm not sure. Marilyn has a long history at both Odysseus and Don Beck. And so this is a work that was originally done by them, and I have since picked it up. Don and I have worked it together over the years, and bless his soul, now that he's gone, I'm continuing that work. So the board game, essentially, I recast it as the Cultural Spiral Quest, okay? And it's a game in which we have 70 to 80 questions based on whether or not we're going to engage with the beige meme, which the basic set of statements is what it really is, are categorized in those various meme stacks. And what happens, real quick, I'll tell you, is people will get together, 30 people, I'll split them in 5 or 6 teams, and they read a card. And from reading that card, they will then say, is this a value we see in the workplace? And they will place a card down and say, yes, it is, or no, it's not, or we kind of partially have it. So the first iteration of the board game is you read the statement of a value, and that value statement resonates and comes directly from the thinking construct, if you will, of one of the Vmemes, purple, red, blue, orange, green, yellow, and so on. And as they distribute these cards, after I split them in 4 or 5 teams, each team is given about an hour to distribute the cards. It's got to be fast paced because we want them in their intuitive knowing, not in the deliberative, well, what about this? What about that? We want the instantaneous response. And so we'll appoint a leader to say, if you're deliberating too long, the leader should just take the card and make an executive decision and say, we partially have it, put it down. So after you distribute the first series of questions, you then ask a second series of questions about the values for which you just reviewed, about 70 cards. And you will either say, for values we have, you then ask the second question, we want to keep that value, or we want to jettison that value. For values we partially have, you want to say, we want to build and get and embrace that value more, or partially have it, and you know what, we don't want it anyway. And then the third set of values where you place cards on the first instance is values we don't have. And then the second level of question would be, we don't have it, but we want it. Or we don't have it, and nor do we want it. Okay, so you go through this, and now what's happening, it's a very loud room because 5 teams are talking amongst themselves trying to get through that hour. Because at the back end of that hour, they all get to report out, and that's when they can have a conversation with the other 4 or 5 teams. And that's essentially what this game, that's essentially how the game is played. Now, I use the game and as a lead-in to the Cultural Discovery Workshop. And the Cultural Discovery Workshop is a workshop I designed to take the benefits of both spiral dynamics on the ground, because spiral dynamics can be very heady, very cerebral. And so the game is a way in which to make it concrete. And before we do anything, the end conversation about the values that we experience, we will then take the values and redistribute those cards into a key template, which essentially identifies if you have a big stack of cards in purple, for instance, that means that organization really like to experience the mystical for whatever reason, right? Take mystical to be whatever you want it to be, or whatever. It could be orange, it could be green, whatever. But it will not be just one stack. There'll be an admixture of various value systems coming online and are the dominant or supportive of the core values that the organization professes. And this is simply, this is, hold on. So this is simply a snapshot of those values and how they are described in the context of organizational styles. Okay, and I won't bother reading this to you for the sake of time, but you could appreciate the fact that if you decide you are very much involved with structure because you have an IT company and you're dealing with cybersecurity and all these other things, and so the order-driven hierarchy comes to the forefront as a useful construct in that organization. But if you, on the other hand, are looking at an organization that is somewhat more advanced, and I can't read it down here because my, oh, let me move this. But if you see the 8th level turquoise, is detects holistic energy. And very much, I believe, the manifestations out of living cities, Earth, very much reside somewhere in second tier. Can't put my finger exactly on it, but when I read detect holistic energy flows and build everything together, and that binds everything together, constructs large-scale mandates in action on behalf of all life, right? Nurtures all human manifestations and contributes to the whole. I mean, this is very much how Living Cities Earth co-founders talk, right? So there's not even I would say, I would be so bold as to say it's not necessarily even aspirational. I believe the folks involved with Living City Earth reside here as a key component of the memescape that reflects the organization. I'll leave it, this is simply the all quadrants, all levels, 4Q8L, as we call it in Spiral Dynamics Integral. And it's basically based on the 5 levels, action, structures, worldview. So if you're going to make an intervention in an organization, you need to decide exactly where we want to work. When I made the term, arrest, relieve, and resolve, you can arrest certain actions to just make sure things stop or continue in some manner. You will arrest systems and structures that have become debilitating or non-functional. But then when you get to the worldview value memes, which is an extension of how you interpret life conditions, this is at the level in which you're trying to resolve deep-seated wicked problems and social messes. And so I'll leave it there. We only got like 4 or 5 minutes. And that's pretty much all I really, in this short period of time. Well, I guess let me point out one last thing, okay? There is, I got this from the lean world, and I use it often. Cultural transformation. People don't think of Lean Six Sigma as a cultural thing, but I'm going to tell you this. Everybody and their brother, particularly in manufacturing, have signed on to lean practices, Six Sigma. These days, it's agile. So bottom line is, these are technocratic kinds of things. But you could go to Toyota University, which is the birthplace of lean, right? Continuous process improvement. I mean, it's where it was birthed. And they will allow even their competitors to attend their 12-week course because they'll share all the technical tools. They'll share all the algorithms and any artifact that has anything to do with Lean Six Sigma. And why would Toyota do that with their competitors? Because anybody could attend. Any Ford employee could attend the Toyota 12-week university, or any other car manufacturer for that matter. And why is that? That's because Toyota realizes their culture is not as easily transmitted as is the technical skills. And so in order to have a transformation of a cultural nature, these are the areas that need to line up. And any one of them, if done not holistically, will leave you with what's on the right side. If you get them all right, the vision, the skills, the incentives designed into the approach and initiative, the resources properly applied, and an action plan followed, you will get effective change. But let's say you don't have a vision. People are confused. Let's say you don't have the skills. People are like, they're anxious. They can't do it, And if you don't have incentives, like, why should I stop doing what I'm doing when I'm rewarded in certain ways? You'll get gradual change. People will go, okay, I'll do it when I get a minute. Or if you are not providing the proper resources, allocating the right minds and people to the deal, you will get a group of people who are just frustrated. And of course, with no written action plan, you get a bunch of false starts. And so that's my real quick overview. And if I could, I'm going to share one thing. And since I'm cutting into my other presentation. I think I just want to show you guys something that
Darrell Ferrell also has a question.
okay.
And if you don't
I
mind.
don't have, I don't have so much a question as a reflection, and just a bit of feedback. It was really wonderful hearing what you were sharing. I know it's been a little bit difficult, with the PowerPoint and all that, but just getting the basics of what you've been working on is really wonderful for me, because as I'm busy looking at the city certification and the Global Mayors Academy, these are very important components, modules you're sharing here, because you know what? I've just shared before this about the SRG journeys. Now, SRG journeys is it's about understanding the paradigm shift, right? It's not about the paradigm shift itself. And so what happens is many of you, like what you've just shared with me now, you're actually built certain methodologies to help actually help and process that paradigm shift that needs to take place, which is really wonderful. So it's been incredible watching how all the bits and pieces over this emergathon just totally fit together. And it's making my job so easy, because I can just see, wow, this goes here, that goes there. So Darrell, thank you so much, because we're going to need that, because you're talking about exactly the same thing we are, except in the context of organization and how they make that culture shift and that paradigm shift. And so this is going to be an important part. So at some point, if we could sit down and really talk about how we include this as a module in both the city certification as well as the Global Mayors Academy, we'll obviously have to work on how we do that. But I think it's going to be a very beautiful, mesh working. Let's put it that way.
I think so. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I would also encourage you to talk to Christiane Schuler. Or maybe just listen to her presentation as well, because I think her work could also really match with what you're doing in the organization, as in how do they develop the language and the actual kind of negotiation of humaning well together. Right. And so I would totally encourage you to connect with her around that.
With who, Farron?
Christiane Schuler.
Okay.
She spoke about the language of spaces, but it was particularly around organizational language. And there she is showing her face over there. I really think you guys need to talk as well, because I'd like to include your model and her model.
Here.
I don't know if you've been listening to his Christiane, but you can see how yours is that extension of this aspect of him. You doing the physical, how do you do all these values, all that kind of stuff. But hers is about how do you actually do that? How do you almost see the sacred in each other?
Oh, yeah, that was really important. I mean, spaces are very important. I mean, it's very important. I mean, if I track what you're saying, absolutely. Because if the space is not right, I mean, it's down to things like this. If when you sit in a circle and there's any extra things in the room, it disturbs the feng shui, if I could put it that way. All things have to come into the room and flow properly. And extra chairs, extra tables, things that are just messy aren't welcome. I'll put it like that. So if I track what you're saying, but absolutely. So Alexia, if I could indulge you, could you put up the version 2 for me? I don't want to take any more time trying to find my PowerPoint for that. I thought I had it, but now I don't see it.
Okay, sure. Yeah, let me do it.
All right. So where I ended, I was going to show you guys a picture of the game board. But for sake of time, I'll skip it for now, because I didn't get a chance to put the game board inside my presentation. But the game board is being developed. I mean, it was developed. I'm refreshing it now. I recently did this in Brazil, and so it got translated into Portuguese. So it went great. And so, but that's a front end to what I call rapid alignment workshop. And or in the context of what we're talking here, I also do what's called cultural discovery workshop. Okay, so and go to the next slide. So I already talked about this, talked about that. Okay, so go back to the goals, because the goals with this is a little different. Okay, what problems? So this part of the presentation is where I am a lot more explicit about the goodness of the Odysseus methodology. I maintain my certification with Odysseus. These are all concepts derived from the Odysseus methodology. Although I've changed the nature of a workshop, they call theirs a synergistic diagnosis, and it's a 3-day affair. and it's very orange. I'll put it like that. Although it's orange coming from a very yellow place. Nevertheless, I have combined the Sparta Dynamics integral with the Odysseus methodology and came up with the cultural discovery workshop. And the goals are very similar to the Odysseus. Like, what is the style of management, and how do you assemble and design a complementary team, which is a big focus of the Odysseus methodology. They have what's called the four vitamins. And in these four vitamins, essentially, are the ingredients for leadership mindsets, if you will. I mean, you could do all kinds of assessments. You could do temperament assessments like the Myers-Briggs. You could do the DISC. So I've come across all kinds of assessments, including the one I use for Sparta Dynamics, which is based on the work of values match. Okay, so essentially, you do some kind of assessment to get a sense of what the leadership what the leadership is comprised of. And then what do you need to change in your strategy, structure, accountability, all the cultural aspects of who you are. And one of the key things in inquiring of an organization, what it is they want, where do they see their future headed, comes down to the analysis of what is called the theory of corporate life cycles. Now, this is a very interesting thing. The very first time I did one of these workshops on my own, I was still doing the synergistic diagnosis, pure Odysseus. And it was the first time I did one on my own. And it was an organization that had gone through 2 downsizing, right? So they started out at 200 some people. They got cut in half. And then after their second downsizing, they were down to about 40 people. So they went from 250, 240, whatever it was. I wasn't there at the time, but the person, I was going around the room, checking in on people, getting their expectations. And one guy said to me, you know what, sir, I'm sure you're very good at what you do. And I'm sure what we're about to experience is going to be beneficial. But in all honesty, your corporate life cycle picture, I showed them a picture of the corporate life cycle. And at the end of the corporate life cycles, there's a term called death. Okay. And he said, well, you see that on the right side of your pictorial, you see that where it says death? We've been there twice. So honestly, what could you possibly say to us, with all due respect, that would get us excited? And I got it, and I was teaching at the graduate school at the time, and one of my students lived in Serbia, and she was working on her master's degree. And essentially, she had written a paper about how Serbia went through the war, and basically they died and then reemerged. And so I came back the next day and I shared that with them. Long story short is, at the end of those 2 days, for which, mind you, was my very first time, I kid you not, people were crying. They were crying because they realized all hope was not gone. And what I took them through, I'll share a few of the slides here with you in a minute. What I took them through was pretty much this methodology. And what I realized in that moment was that if done properly, a well thought out theoretical framework in the hands of someone who's properly trained and have the degree of, let's say, empathy, I'll use that term, to understand the room and know what's in the room and read the energy of the room, you can get to where you need to be and make a difference in organizations' lives. You go to the next slide. So the Cultural Discovery Workshop is 1 or 2 days, okay? And I mentioned the Cultural Spiral Quest game, which is is what we do to launch the whole workshop. So before we do anything, we have a combination of experiencing the value memes in the context. And this is a real important attribute in dealing with organizations of governments, right? Governments are inherently bureaucratic. And we don't necessarily see bureaucracy as a bad thing, by the way. A true government professional will tell you the bureaucracy is in place to slow everything down. Because in any given moment, life, technology, pick a topic, is spiraling in a VUCA manner. So government's role is to slow all that down so that real contemplative and insightful deliberations can take place. It's on purpose. The bureaucracy is on purpose. Whereas in the Odysseus methodology, the bureaucracy is seen as not a healthy manifestation of human endeavor. And so you have these two ideas you hold in hand paradoxically and try to navigate that. So in the Cultural Discovery Workshop, I say all that to make the point, we kicked off a Cultural Discovery Workshop with the Value Spiral Quest game so that two things can happen. People can come to see, no matter what they have up on their wall, in terms of we are this, we are that. The values they print up and put up in the conference rooms is one thing. But the values that people talk about at the table are the lived experience values in operation. And we do that at the end of that gaming session with an appreciative inquiry, which is to say, we're going to focus on the positive attributes, those productive and positive things that make us who we are. So you set in a government context the positive attributes as a fundamental basis to have a conversation. And now you're ready to go ahead and explore challenges that you need to arrest, relieve, and resolve. And so in the Cultural Discovery Workshop, go on to the next slide. We could skip this. I want to point this out here, okay? If you guys can see this well enough, here's what you have going on. And I won't read all these topics to you, but let me talk about it in general. In any organization, 95% of the energy, time, and attention, I call it, I often say time, talent, and treasure. Time, talent, and treasure. All those resources are being expended in pursuit of the primary reason the organization exists in the marketplace, or why a city government exists to bring services to their constituency. So that's 95% of the energy, time, talent, and treasure need to be spent on executing those activities that make the organization who they are for the constituency market they serve. And that PA you see there is one of those 4 items of management expertise. The P stands for productive or producing. The A stands for administrating, okay? And you're going to produce and administrate those results in those processes, services, and products that are necessary to keep your operation going and to keep adding value to the community. Now, that's 95% of the time. However, any organization must simultaneously deal with the changes that are always coming through. And what we propose is, this is very much what Odysseus considers entrepreneurial for the E, and I is integrative. And you can think of it like this. P is concerned with, what are we doing? The key question for a producer-oriented mindset is, what is the product service we're producing? The key question for an administrative mindset, and you need both. You need to administer processes and you need to produce results, right? These are fundamental to an organization. And the A stands for administrating. So if I'm going to do something, I need to properly administrate that. Otherwise, we're just in chaos, right? Which our leadership in Living City Earth does a very good job of, right? So in terms of dealing with changing coming into the organization, if the PA is by definition a top-down directive, get it done kind of mentality, the organizational change is a function of entrepreneurial mindsets whose basic fundamental question is, why are we doing this? Why are we producing buggy whips when nobody's using buggies anymore? I mean, this is what entrepreneurs live for, the why question, and also when. When are we going to do this? And then of all those mindsets, the I is the key, because the I is the people-oriented mindset. That is who's involved, who's making decisions. The fundamental question is who. Fundamental questions of a producer is, what are we doing? Fundamental question of an administrator is, how are we going to do this? How are we doing it? Fundamental questions of an entrepreneurial mindset and management is, why are we doing this and when are we going to get it done? And then the fundamental question of the integrator is, who's involved? And now that, to manage change, is much more of a bottoms up. And notice the Change Council, which I operated for over a decade in various organizations I worked, is that environment in which once a month for 4 hours, maybe 8, based on how big the organization is. You get together. You're not trying to resolve a problem. You're not trying to take care of an action. You're speculating and ideating, envisioning what is to be. And that conversation is a fundamental different conversation than the blocking and tackling that go on in the normal day-to-day operations that would be reflected on the left-hand side. So go to the next slide. So you change from the bottom up, so to speak. I like to speak in terms of middle up down. This is a real fundamental map of the Odysseus methodology, and a lot of ideas are here. But I'm going to try to do my best to give you the 2-minute, summary. Change happens all the time in organizations, all of the time. It produces problems and also solutions, right? Excuse me. It produces problems and also opportunities for which the management then have to resolve vis-a-vis solutions, right? In so doing, you have 2 veins of consideration. One is there is a need to decide something, and inherent in that need to decide is the conflict of the styles, the producer who's worried about what, the administrator who's worried about how, the entrepreneur is worried about why, and the integrator is worried about who's going to do this, who's going to be involved. So those fundamental managerial styles are inherently in conflict, okay? Now, that's just to make the decision. Once you get to a point where you coalesce properly these decision makers and the diversity of styles have been resolved to where, okay, we know we have conflict, but we're trusting and respecting one another, which is on the left side, it says mutual trust and respect. You get to a place of mutual trust and respect by saying, oh, well, Darrell's a very entrepreneurial guy. We know how he thinks. So let Darrell be Darrell, Farrell be Farrell. And, she's a very, get it done, how it's to be done, and who's doing it type. I'm just speculating here. I have no assessments of Farrell or anybody else for that matter. But the point is people are different. But when you trust and respect one another, you let Darrell be Darrell, you let Alexei be Alexei. So that's one area. Then you come down the right side. Because deciding is one thing, but implementing is another thing. And if deciding is a democratic approach, implementing is very dictatorial. However, when you're implementing, you need to deal with what Odysseus calls CAPI. And CAPI stands for the coalescence. And this is of all the things that brought the spiral dynamics integral community together with the Odysseus community, the main concept that Don Beck gravitated towards was this idea of CAPI. The coalescence of authority, power, and influence. Authority, of course, is the person in positional authority, the person who signs checks, pays payrolls, hire and fires. They have that authority, right? The influencer are experts. And in the context of Living Cities Earth, we probably show up as influencers to an organization. And power is imbued in anybody in the organization with a responsibility. And this is where it becomes real important. Because if I'm a woman working on the production line and I'm putting one left shoe in the box and one right shoe in the box, and I'm pushing it down the line. But if in that organization, they have pissed me off for some reason, you know what, today I'm gonna put one left shoe and I'm gonna put a second left shoe. At that point, I am no longer contributing in a constructive way. My power is to either conform and do what I've been asked to do, or to rebel, so to speak, and not do that. So I am withholding my cooperation. And power goes to anyone in the organization in a process. It's not about authority. It's different, right? Now, all that said, all of this is conflict. All of this is VUCA of a kind. And what gets you out of the road of going down the road of destruction is the degree which you have engendered mutual trust and respect, to let everybody be who they are. And interest is very fascinating. We could spend a whole hour discussing why interest is different than decision-making. But anyway, I'll leave it there for now. Next slide. Another key concept, and just a time check. Okay, we're almost out. So I'll leave this key concept here it comes down to this. To the degree you have mutual trust and respect will allow you to focus on the external market. Your capabilities and the needs in the marketplace can be adequately addressed if you can muster enough integral, if you could stay integrated enough to address the external market. Now, here's the point. The point is I have 100% energy, but if 50% of my energy is internal to me, watching my back, making sure that Alexei doesn't, undercut me on something or overbid something, or basically, if I can't trust and respect the people I'm working with, that energy is not available to me to service customers. And so, getting the balance and ensuring that there's enough mutual trust and respect will allow for you as an organization to focus on the right things. And the last slide is probably the key thing I felt. I mentioned PAEI. And along the corporate life cycle, this is the brilliance of Odysseus. Along the corporate life cycle, I'm a strong believer in if it exists and you figure out a way to use it and collaborate with it, other tools, it is what it is. Which is why I maintain my certification with Odysseus, because I use the methodology so regularly. But you notice, when you come into an organization, one of the things we do is assess where the organization is on the corporate life cycle. You don't see it here, but right before stability, Odysseus calls this prime. Prime is when the balance of how happy your workforce is in collaboration with how well you're growing your revenues and profits with how well you're growing and staying in the market. When all that is all that it should be, you're in what's called prime. And prime is an equilibrium of a kind. When you cross over into an aging organization, what happens with the PAI, different manifestations occur. And what the ingredients to address an intervention anywhere along the corporate life cycle matters is reading we do an assessment to see what your managerial makeup is. And the bottom line is this: when you are an aging organization, you have a lot of administration and you have a lot of people stuff, but you're no longer entrepreneurially engaged and you're no longer productively engaged. You're just maintaining the administrative state of a kind. I'll leave it there because we're out of time. But anyway, I got 10 more minutes? So we could discuss things, I know I went fast. I apologize, you guys, but it's like 30 minutes, and there's just a lot of ideas I cared about making sure at least we just touch base with them. So let me say this one thing, since we got a couple of minutes. When we did the assessment, we brought Odysseus in to restructure an organization I was working in, and we did this assessment, corporate life cycles, and here's what we found, which was very fascinating. Half of the leadership, there's about 40 executives, half of the leadership felt we were a young organization. We were on the uptick, right? In go-go, adolescence headed towards prime there. And another half felt, no. We're definitely a stable aristocracy where we no longer have entrepreneurial zeal. And in terms of producing, we've been doing this forever and a day. The mission of the command was 50 years old and they know what they were doing. So half the group said we were aging. The other half of the group said, no, we're just getting off the ground. What we realized, if you see in the middle of the slide there, you realize there's a term right smack in the middle of the in the picture. There's a PA organization. And PA organization occurs, it begins, you're actually a young organization beginning to act old. And we found, after a conversation of about an hour or so, it was a mathematician, I'll never forget, it was a mathematician who said, you know what, wait. I think we have prematurely aged. And we talked about it. And the executive director related to us at this time, we had been on a trajectory of a United States Navy to get 360 ships or something like this. And after the wall fell, the mandate for those 360 ships went away. And there was no longer the need for all that firepower. And so the mission of this organization was interrupted by that. And that was what was the illuminating thing, was that we had prematurely aged. But again, the prescription for shunting and addressing in an intervention a prematurely aged organization is exactly the same as an intervention designed for a truly aged organization. Same thing. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I know that's fast, so any questions?
Thank you so much, Darrell. We can see in the chat a lot of comments from Marilyn. Marilyn, would you like to share?
Yeah. Hi, Darrell. Hey, this was beautiful. Thank you. And
Mhm.
no, I never saw that game. That game somehow escaped me.
All
So
right.
I'd love to see it. And it strikes me as you're talking about it that it would be really interesting to compare it with the questions that Marina uses in Inner Keys,
Okay.
because
Yeah, no, yeah.
that would be great. And yeah, I love your you remind me all kinds of things that might be very useful for me here at the Eco Village Findhorn right now, because we're going through a real life cycles dilemma. I'm
Hmm.
not sure that we've gone through premature death, but we're pretty close to death right now with one
Uh,
of the organizations, one of the key organizations, and the amount of impact that it has all over. Yes, CAPI is something I personally cannot live without. So thanks for yes, I use it all the time
I do
to
too.
actually make decisions about how to design and who to work with, and what I'm observing yeah on the ground. So and I also wanted to point out, Darrell, I don't know if you knew, because others wouldn't know that we both worked together in the Adizes
Yeah,
graduate school as well. We
right.
never taught together. We
No,
spelled each other
but
off.
I use your curriculum to teach.
Uh-huh. Mm.
I
But
use your syllabus. Yeah.
yeah, the PAEI is really the four voices of the city. And they also line up with the bees. So the
Hmm.
roles in the beehive. So this is why I've always valued Odysseus, as he got it right for the organizations and the life cycles, and it's living, it's
It is.
alive, and
You
it's
know, yeah.
very flexible.
No, you're right. And I used the syllabus that Marilyn developed for the Deacon's Graduate School. I used it for 5, 6 years after she had left. It was very useful. A lot of people will tell me it was one of the best classes they've attended, at the Deacon's Graduate School anyway. But no, I completely agree with you on that. The conformance. I mean, the beehive is very apropos. It's interesting. Very, very interesting. I see with the Living Cities Earth, particularly with Integral City. I mean, I've always desired to try to do something with this. So this is why when I saw and heard what you guys reached out to me, and thank you, Marilyn, for thinking about me, was so on point, very much.
Yeah.
I had, I
And
had,
and you actually got to meet Lev, I think, last summer when he was
yeah,
traveling. So
yeah, he
that was
came by.
pretty awesome.
It
Yeah.
was pretty
Yeah.
good. Yeah, we sat down, had a hamburger or something like that. But no, it's a great work. I mean, I think, I was going to mention, Dr. Deeses. So Dr. Deeses and Dr. Beck would always come to me and ask me about the other one. And so I was in this interesting place where, and I asked Dr. Deeses once, I said, well, what was it about Spark Dynamics that allowed you, of all the things he's done in his life, it was the longest collaboration he's ever done. His methodology is full and complete into itself. But he said, well, when I conceived of the theory of corporate life cycles and the theory of change he uses, he said, I never considered values. I never did. And so when he came upon Spark Dynamics, he went, there's a plug and play, and as you mentioned, Don was very impressed. And what he saw was a yellow solution to the very orange problem. That's my way of terming it. And I have a couple of interviews where I interviewed both of them. I still have the recording where both of them are talking about why they collaborate with one another. It's very interesting relationship. They both really respected each other. Adisa would say to me sometimes, I don't see why Adisa is not bigger, Darrell, which is very, very capable organization and very successful in its own right. Whereas Don's method, he was like Johnny Appleseed. Spark Dynamics was everywhere, and he would lament about the profitability of the thing. I would tell him, well, Don, yours is a movement. It's really not a business.
Thanks, Darrell. It's just lovely to hear you again.
Uh-huh. And that's it. Well, look, I'm right on time. See, I've been trained by the admirals. They give you an hour, and at the end of the day, you have 5 minutes.
You see, thank you so much. I love also adhesives and spiral dynamics integral approaches, of course. And I was happy to see, how you link it together, right? And Marilyn just mentioned that it's also for voices. And I think the goal of Emergathon is achieved. Already we are getting to know each other more. We are see a lot of connections and interconnections, right? And I think that's only the beginning, right, of our future conversations, right? How we can put all our experience, knowledge, skills, perceptions, right, together to contribute more and impact more to the cities, organizations, individuals all together, right? Any other questions? I saw Yuri is here. Yuri was hosting the whole first part of Emergathon.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, I don't know if you know, Darrell, what capi means in Italian.
No, what is it?
No, so capo is boss or leader, and capi is the plural of bosses or leaders.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it also is clothes, items of clothes. So interesting connection here. Capi
Interesting.
is leaders actually and bosses. So in Italian, boss is kind of capo, el capo, no, it's the boss. But
Interesting.
it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited, I mean, a lot of thoughts are going through my head. I very much appreciate the opportunity, I'll send you, Marilyn, I can send you the little bit more on the game, and whoever, I can collaborate with, I'm completely open to that. I mean,
Thank you. Thank you so much. Darrell, also please share in our chats the videos of interviews. I would love to watch it for sure.
Okay. Well, it was just audio. It wasn't video. It was an audio.
Audio, okay, audio. Yeah, that's
But
great.
I'll look for it and find it. A lot of good
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Darrell, again, and all our co-founders.